Choo choo. Bubble. Bubble.
Funny you should say that there, Auntie. I remember getting blocked one time and joining the rob by an accident.
Feel the thunder in my veins tonight, racing through me like a freight train ride. Heart is pounding like a hammer strike. Can't contain this wildfire inside. Got a voltage that I can't control. Lightning courses through my very soul. Every heartbeat shakes me to the core. Never felt this kind of rush before. I'm ready to explode. Can't hold it anymore. Burning alive, burning alive. Flames getting higher, pure desire. I'm burning alive, burning alive. Feel the power. This is my hour. I'm burning alive. Oh, yeah, I'm burning alive. Like the engine running way too hard. Fuel is pumping and I can't be stopped. Red light screaming, pushing to the edge. Living life without a single regret. I'm ready to explode. Can't hold it anymore. I'm burning alive, burning alive. Flames getting higher, pure desire. I'm burning alive, burning alive. Feel the power. This is my hour. I'm burning alive. Strike a match and watch me ignite. Blaze through the darkness into the light. No turning back, no compromise. This is what it feels like to be burning alive, flames getting higher, pure desire. I'm burning alive.
Welcome on. What is happening? Steam Train, what is the crack? Hook? June. Oh no, I love the opening song for Streets of Rage. It's class.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. McKen's What Is Happening by G. That was just an AI one I made like 5 minutes ago before I went live. I was like, oh, I want something, you know, kind of represents Final Fantasy 16. And I was like, oh, that's a tune. I'm going to play that. And then I was halfway through listening and I was like, oh, this isn't Final Fantasy 16. This is a game where I just killed a whole pile of people with napalm bombs. And now there's a song with a man dancing with the lyrics burning alive. Oh, I did fucked up. But it's a nice song, so, you know. My bad. But welcome on. What is happening? Not much. Fucking busy day the day at work. Took ages to get home as well. Now, the weather wasn't overly bad, but it just seemed like everybody was a bit mental today. But what is the crack with you? How are we getting on? I seen you and Ruddy chatting away as well about that idea, and it's a fucking awesome idea. I really like it. I like it. You should do it. And if you don't do it, I'm going to do it. So there's that. But yeah, we're going to play a wee bit more Spec Ops The Line tonight. Oh, good. How was your day? It was grand. It was grand. It was busy. I've still have a busy week ahead of me. But tomorrow should be my last day in the office. So depending on how the weather is in the morning, I'll either be working at home or going on. I think you might work on it this week. Nice one. Let me know. Keep me updated what the crack is. I'm not going to say anything, but I really like it. It's a really, really, really cool idea. Did you see I got a new transition as well? I just found some website that lets you upload your logo and do a transition for free, and I was like, you know what? I'm fed up using other companies' logos. I'm just going to use my own. So I did that instead. Tomahawk, what's happening? Oh, how's it going? It is going really, really good. Black Polo, Black Handle Cup. Leyoric has turned professional since Saturday night. That's what it is. To be honest, I just haven't changed. I've come home. This is what I wore to work today. Look, thank you for giving Tomahawk a wee shout out. Awesome, thank you. Balls, I didn't even notice. Show us. I'll show you now in a wee second. So, I got I have that new transition that just has my logo on it, and I thought it's a bit simpler. It's a bit handier. I did like the claw thing, but you know, it was overly complicated for what it was. And that's the problem with transitions. If you make them overly complicated, or if they're like in a large MP4 file or something, they can kind of mess it up.
Look at this graph.
You know, boss, you're right. You know, I didn't believe you, but you're right. I should look at that graph. You know, and you know, there needs to be more graphs. There needs to be more graphs. I'm going to get the phone, then I go back and let them know. I'm going to let them know. Actually, that reminds me about that time that I only paid 45p to go to a 50 Cent concert. It's because Nickelback were opening for them. But thank you for giving Big Boss a shout out as well. Why did that not automatically do the Tomahawk one? Yeah. Began.
Solid snake.
I heard overly complicated and thought, would introduce myself.
Yeah.
Like, boss, I'm raging. I missed your stream earlier as well because I'm really enjoying your stream of Cyberpunk at the moment. But I was in the office and I couldn't actually lurk anybody. I was flat out busy today, so it's one of them ones where even if I'm running around. Speaking of graphs, how's the Flemish getting to know people graph? It's not a graph, it's just an Excel spreadsheet at the moment. It could be transferred in the graph form. I just don't know how we'd represent all the values. Because there's an incredible amount of people the Flemish forgets he knows. And that's why there's so much information that goes onto that spreadsheet. I got the pleasure to work, but sadly annoying people in work wouldn't leave me alone. My God, tons of bitches coming over and making you do stuff for money. It's like you're some sort of prostitute. Hook. Ran well today. Hook didn't kill it this time. That's right. He destroyed it last time. But that's what it is. Cyberpunk, especially with mods, can be pretty demanding. And it's getting that balance. I find it with Monster Hunter Wilds, where I wasn't expected to be so heavy on my CPU, and it just killed everything else. So it's different games. Some of them are heavier in CPUs. I know MMOs are CPU heavy. And then other ones just go, oh, we're just taking over your entire GPU. So it's ebbs and flows. Ebbs and flows. I did indeed. My goodness. I tried to get out the door as well at 4:30 today, and I just kept getting asked questions. And I think I've got to the point at work now where I accidentally know stuff. And it's a detriment to my free time. A detriment. Well, I found out as well that apparently on PC it gets worse the longer it's on. Oh, the FPS drops after a few hours. You're supposed to restart. That sounds very familiar to what issue I was having with Cyberpunk at launch, and it was to do with the cores in my CPU and changing something in the DLL file that, you know, the Cyberpunk DLL file that fixed it. Have a wee Google. Have a wee Google. Memory leak, as per usual these days. That's true as well. There's a lot of games so badly optimized. Like, for as much as I love Monster Hunter Wilds, it does not run well on PC. Teddy, what's happening? Good evening, you handsome devil. Hope you're doing well. I'm doing awesome, Teddy. Even better now that you're here. Our core affinity. Yeah. Cyberpunk was bad with that at the very start as well. And it was just changing the value from like 8 to 16 or something that did the job. Oh, thank you, Hook. I was about to do that. Look at that premium mod coming on here, shouting people out, doing his job. That's because he's just transferred from the office where he was made to do work, and now he's like, well, still in work mode. Here we go. But what we're going to do as well, and I know it's kind of superfluous because you all know him.
Hello there.
You all already love him, but that's Hook as well. So if anybody hasn't followed Hook, give Hook a wee follow. McKenzie, you should follow Hook. I think you'd like him. You'd get on well with him. I've been a little struggle today on. That's right, you're playing it as well, Tomahawk. I love Cyberpunk. I thought it was very good, and Keanu Reeves was phenomenal on it. Don't use my magic against me. Oh my God. All night. If you say his name 3 times, he appears. Say it 3 times, he appears. But we're going to play some more Spec Ops tonight. I don't know how much longer we have left. Now, I did talk about something the other night in Hookstream, and people thought it was good. They actually thought it was a good idea. So what I do sometimes, and I did it with Kazan, is whenever I'm not sure how long I've left in the game and not sure how many streams I've left, I'll go on the chat GPT and say, listen, I don't want you to spoil anything for me, but I've just defeated this boss or just done this part of the game. I do 3-hour streams. How much do you think I have left? And it'll approximate. It'll say, oh, if you're going for collectibles or you're going for 100 completionist, it's going to take 6 hours. But if you're just going golden path, it'll take 3 and you'll do it in one stream. And I'm like, happy days. Now I have a fair idea, no spoilers, but I have a fair idea how long I've left. So it tells me then to have to prepare something else or get the next game ready. It's great, and I've been running reasonably well most of the time until Hook raids and break things. But he does that on purpose. The raid itself doesn't bring him enough attention, so he has to hack into your PC and Cloudflare DDoS attack and just wreck it just to do it. I've been following Hook for the last 20 odd years, and look where it's got. Exactly. Remember that time you ended up on the mountain and almost died? That was Hook's fault because you followed him. Then go take Cyberpunk offline. I was playing it for the pod. That's right, you were playing it for the podcast as well. Because it's game of the month, isn't it? High Scores, High Stakes podcast. I have a skill for this. I rated Chris in the past, suggested a mod and import the stream. That's right, it was Resident Evil 4, and you wanted them to put in a Master Chief character mod, and it wrecked the stream. Still can't shake you off. Well, after a few drinks, maybe. Hook has to raid a bigger PC to remind everyone how good a Soulsborne is. Hook is the final boss. That's what it is. It's not the Rock. It's Hook. Hook's the problem. But he was fucking smashing Bloodborne the other night as well. And it was really, really good. He first go, we called it a hook shot now. I think, Teddy, you claimed that word. It's a hook shot if you beat a Souls boss first go. And that's what it's called. It's also what happens on date night. It's not even a mod you suggest. You told me to go from borderless full screen. My whole he did. He was coming on. He's just like, you know what? This will work. And you just see the steam rising up from beside Big Boss. It's true, and that's what it's called. See, I remember things on occasion. But we're going to get into the game now. So last stream, when we did this last week, was a bit contentious. So we murdered a whole pile of civilians with what seemed to be white phosphorus or napalm. And I think my character's getting a bit more and more unhinged. I said last time, won't happen again. Yep, and your life just got better. Let's go. Leyoric transition. Here we go. I think it just ended up in the... We did the next little bit. I don't know where I'm going now. Oh, I have to go down the zip line.
Go! Pass it over! Cover me!
And I forgot all the buttons. My own AI song is now stuck in my fucking head. I'm gonna have to put it on the Spotify now so I can listen to it on the way to work tomorrow. I need to... Oh, no. We will keep that Scout Tactical, sir.
One more down! Careful! Soldiers heading your way!
He took ages to die.
Shit! Enemy down!
I'm blocking your raids. You should do that. You should just block him in general. Just ban him. Just for the shenanigans that he causes. Very Gears of War playset. It is. It's very ducking behind cover, third-person shooter, but it's more beige instead of grey. Where are they playing Bloodborne here? Resource gathering. Oh, nice one. This is very dirty. Look at him. Doing that offline shenanigans.
Head down, Walker! They're on your side! See if you can flank them somehow! You got it!
Can I just hit them like this? No, that would involve actual skill. Right, we're going to lift that wee gun. How do I slide over? Slide!
Watch out! Fighting from behind! One more down. Got another one!
Thankfully, the enemies aren't as tanky as Gears of War. Why is that flashing?
Fuck.
Oh, it's the game?
Are you kidding me? I don't need this shit right now.
What the fuck is going on?
They still got them.
That's a mannequin. That's not a man. That's a man.
I'm busy.
It can. What the fluff? Seriously, what is going on?
Shit.
Seizure? A wee bit, yeah, but it's actually, it seems to be part of the game. That's not him. Jesus Christ, he's right beside me. I can just shoot that round the corner. What is going on? Right, go on, please. Go on, stop it now. That was horrible. I'm definitely getting rid of the scout rifle because I don't think I need that in there. What?
Over the bridge, go! I'm crossing over!
Over the bridge and far away, the Teletubbies are here.
Tango down!
Heads up. Shotgunner.
Gotta reload! Let's go!
Let's see, what kind of weapon am I going to left from these guys? I am left from the MP4.
Soldiers heading your way.
For the sake of Pete.
Down!
Right, I need more ammo for this thing before I go.
Walker, they're on your side. See if you can flank them somehow.
You got it!
Right, I don't know if I want to go in there because of what happened last time. I'm pretty sure that was a... Yeah, I kind of have to go in there, don't I? Can I get out?
What the
Oh,
fuck?
I can't even get out.
Shit! Where are you? Are you kidding me? I don't need this shit right now. They still got them.
This is fucking epilepsy, like.
I said I'm working on it.
Oh, he's dead. Thank God. I mean, I understand what they were going for. No, not like this. I understand what they were going for, but I didn't like that. That wasn't cricket at all.
Take cover.
Studio that everyone's favorite teabag is taking the ball. Rumor
Enemy
has
down!
it they're trying to rescue.
Reloading!
people.
Keep them off me!
You gotta love these guys. They're just gonna keep on trying, even if it kills every last one. Be sure to stop by.
Let's see. Is that my guy? Nope, it's not. We kill
How
him.
far you think he's back?
Kill him too.
You're fine.
Thanks. We've been hearing him since we came through the storm wall. Why?
If we don't
Let's
evacuate
go.
the city now, everyone's gonna die of thirst. Now, I think we can use his system to get the word
Can't
out.
die of thirst. It's only Wednesday. They can only die of thirst on Thursday.
Shit, we got contact.
Where are they?
Right above you. Hurry, we're taking heavy fire.
Hang in there. I'm on it.
Where? Oh, here. Oh, this looks like there's loads of people. There's a guy in there. Look at him. Look at him. Look at him. Look at him.
Hostile is
Look at him.
down!
How is the audio as well? I'm probably going to regret asking that, but how is the audio? What? Thursday. What? 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 I think Stone Cold Steve Austin only said that because he was deaf. Like, Vince was like, Stone Cold, you gotta go do this. He's like, what? What? He's like, oh, that's great. Use that in the promo. What?
Hurry, we're taking heavy fire.
Hang in there. I'm on it.
Right, so how did I die there? Like, I understand I have to go up the stairs.
Keep him off me for a sec!
Easy does it, Marty. You don't want to give up your position. You don't want the other guys to know where you are.
Got a van over here.
Get him back
Who
on his
is
feet.
Lugo?
No can do. I'm pinned down. How you doing, Lugo? I'm fucking dying over here. Hurry, Walker.
Oh, I can't just click on him or anything.
You're good, Adams.
All right. I'll get him back on his feet.
Yeah, you do that.
Thanks,
You do
man.
that. You do that.
That's all of them.
Here comes more of them.
Jesus fuck. When is this gonna end?
Where are they? Up there?
You guys tugging at my heart.
Oh, got him there.
You bitches had it coming.
Shouldn't have stood beside the big explosive thing.
Fucking plan.
Make your way to the top floor. We can use the zip line to cross over. I'll cover you from here. Now move.
Ain't no way across. We're stuck here. Bang, stuck. Clear the area below us. We're gonna rappel down. Let's go moving. Watch him.
You want me to blow that up? Right, okay.
Enemy
Over
down.
this one?
Shit.
Why? I'm pointing there for. Goes up to shoot the guys down there? Right, okay. It's my guys.
Open.
It's annoying the fact they're all wearing the same outfit. Like, I know it's camouflage, but it's just inconsiderate. They could at least wear big icons above their head to let me know who's on my team.
It's clear.
Is that us? Nope.
Now that's it. Go.
Go, 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 go. Oh well, they all want to fire at him.
Watch it. Shotgun on the field. Eyes on that hostile. He's moving from cover.
Got one.
Enemy is KIA. Gun movement. Stairwell on the far side. On the move.
Enemy is KIA. What does that mean? Oh, he drives a Kia. Enemy is Sportage.
Coming up behind us. Damn it, Walker. Keep those guys off us. Keep them off me. Got it.
Man, you're in the wrong game for big icons. Hey! Man, I missed these 60-hour games. So did I. Do you remember we went through a really good spell as well of really good licensed games?
Taking some heavy fire here.
I'm just blowing that up for the sake of it. Explosion. Where? Oh, where are these guys? Oh, no, it's my guys. Oh, shit.
Hostile is down.
Oh, I wonder how you got shot. That must have been a stray bullet from a bad guy. Definitely wasn't me.
Fuckers called in a heavy. Heavy coming this way.
He's a girthy boy. Oh, two of them.
The bad guys are in there.
I can see the bad guys.
Shotgun early.
I can see them. Look, look, look. They're there. Now, I might not always know that's them, and I might accidentally shoot my own men, but, you know,
Down.
I can't be blamed for that.
Damn it. Door's
That's not
locked.
my fault.
We need to find something to blow it open. How about one of them RPGs? Yeah, that should do the trick. Walker, give me some cover fire. One's open. Get in.
Look at them running out with the role-playing games.
Follow us.
Disgraceful.
got it.
Using them against us.
Ambush. Look out. We need to get out of here. Man, they jammed the door. Walker, we need an exit. Blow the door. They're dropping grenades.
You're good. Move.
Oh, that's it. That's the lads.
Lucky everywhere. Shit. Taking heavy fire.
Enemy down.
RPG, look out.
Oh, you hurry up and dice it.
Taking heavy fire. Look out. Moving up. Heading for the roof. Cover
I can hear loads of shouting. I just don't know where they are. Oh, they're up there. Lads. Wait, are you? I don't know if I'm supposed to be moving or just sitting here with this Gatling gun, do you reckon? Oh, got like problem. I tell you what, though, the Final Fantasy 16 TikToks have caused a little bit of discussion.
Streets over here. Watch your aim. One straight bullet.
I thought it was funny. I had a comment the other day where I put up my schedule on TikTok and someone wrote, and there was just Spec Ops on Wednesday and Final Fantasy 16 on Thursday and Saturday, and it's all, one really good game and then a mid. And I was like, you're just, like, I don't need that. You know, you didn't need that. I don't need your opinion on that. It's a schedule. I'm playing the game anyway. You're not going to change it. And then some guy came on to one of the Final Fantasy 16's one. He says, oh, is this actually a good game? And some other fellow started a discussion. He's like, yeah, this is my favorite game. This is great. And we're chatting amongst each other. And I was like, this I like. This I like. He just said something just for the sake of saying something. He didn't. It's a TikTok. Like a text. It's 3 seconds. You don't even have to look at it. And I just thought it was weird to spend that amount of time just to go through, just to say negative stuff. I suppose that's kind of the state of the internet at the moment now, isn't it?
Pay attention to that shotgun!
It's just a very odd way to be, I think, and I suppose a lot of people are like that, where they think their opinion's gospel. Like, I know, my opinion doesn't matter. Most people are like, I don't care what you say.
Zipping over! Me too! Step back!
And I respect that, because I talk some bullshit. How do I get back down? Uncle Flange, what's happening? It's all a case of who asked. Exactly. It was like, oh, this is my schedule for the week.
You okay? I'm fine.
If anybody wants to know.
Don't worry about it. What about you two? Yeah.
And this guy was like,
Fine.
one good game, one mid.
You hear that?
I just deleted the comment. I was like, fuck you. Lads, where are we
Keep
going?
from behind that door. Get ready.
Cutscene.
Go! Drop your fucking weapon! Do it! Okay, now! Okay. Don't shoot. I surrender.
No surrender.
What the hell is this? Somebody doesn't want to play soldier anymore. What's your name? Staff Sergeant Josh Forbes, service number 867530. You are not a prisoner of war. Far as I'm concerned, you're not even a fucking soldier.
Ooh.
You can't. I can do whatever the fuck I want.
I've lost my mind.
The
I am
asshole
doing
over
really
here.
good, Uncle Flange.
Where's
What
your
about you? What is
broadcast?
the
Don't
story?
bother. He's guarded. You'll never reach
We're
him.
playing some Spec Ops,
Our problem,
and
not yours.
it's such a good game.
Top of the Transimmerance building.
Like, it plays really well, and the story is a lot deeper than I thought it was going to be.
Lugo, we reached that tower. Think you can work the broadcast system?
One mass evacuation coming up.
Won't be anyone to evacuate.
What the fuck did you say?
Be smart, Captain. This is the desert. How long do you think these people will survive without water?
Mate, I got a new job today. It's so fucking buzzing.
Colonel
Awesome.
was
What?
to
How?
keep people
You know,
alive.
if you don't mind me asking, what's the job? You don't have to say,
We'll
obviously.
keep that in mind next time he tries to kill
What?
us.
Ready? Well done.
Goodbye's running out of time, gentlemen. Let's move.
GG on the GAOB.
So who's gonna take care of the DJ?
The hell you talking about?
He ain't passing the torch. We're stealing the man's mic.
3 soldiers against a fat ass with an iPod. I'm less than worried.
Gotta expect the unexpected, Adams.
Adapt and overcome, bitch.
Yeah, so I've moved the microphone more to the side now and kind of changed the gain on it because I realized I was like popping under the mic, even though there's a muffy fluff on the front.
Good.
2.5 years, almost 40 applications, and finally got a roll. Oh, nice. But hey, that's it. It's paid off now.
I don't think it's looking for us.
That's a first. Where's it headed? Radio tower. Most
Hard work paid off.
Reinforcements.
And now you become a
That's
millionaire.
what we need. Hey, be thankful for the extra target practice.
But you must be buzzing. Must be. Oh, that is my worst fear. This is my worst fear right here. See them stupid hanging over swimming pools that you can see. Well, this one isn't too bad, but you can see a million miles below it. I would not be going anywhere near it. I would be the fuck off. The fuck. Working in external quality, same company, role managing a load of product manufacturing transfers. I don't know what that means, but it sounds amazing. Sounds a lot smarter than something I could do. So amazing. Well done. Blue new area, super hyped about it. You should be. You did the thing. You were the man. You won the goals. You kissed the fans.
Sounds like a sniper.
Pretty close by the sound of it. Let's step lightly.
I think we need a mod for this game so all the weapons sound like the actual name of it. Sniper! 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 Machine gun, machine gun, machine gun, machine gun, machine gun, machine gun. Yeah, I worked farmer R&D at the moment, but kind of stagnated where I am. It's understandable then. Well done. You're diversifying your portfolio. I need to do the same, but apparently they're not hiring pimps anymore.
Let's take a look.
Ooh, how'd I put on my suppressor again?
Follow my lead, Lugo.
Can I crouch? Can I just get this guy then? It'll be her. Ah. Drastically need a change. No challenges in the job market is, and XP is really nice. But it's really nice for you now because you can kind of move on to different sort of roles if you want to at the later stage and stuff. You're not just not typecasting, but you're not typecasting yourself.
I'm reloading!
This ain't a social visit, asshole.
I did that really cool jump over the top of the thing and then just let him shoot me in the face. Cool. Who are they shooting at? Lads. What's your boggle? What's your boggle? Oh, nope. Probably took the silencer off now. I don't really need it anymore. Now I must convince my director to let me move ahead on my notice period. Well, how's your relationship with your managing director? Do you get on well? Like, is it something that they'd be okay with? Because I suppose if they don't solitude you, they don't technically have to, but if they don't, they might ruin any opportunity of ever getting you back in the future. That's the only thing. Little man, what's happening? How are we doing, my friend? I am doing good. What about yourself? Really good, yeah. She's actually really supportive. Oh, no, then you should be okay. I would say just lay out a really good plan of handovers and stuff, and you should be fine. I am always good, little man. You really are, you know. I always said that about you. What are you doing to celebrate? Yes, what are we doing? Are we having a party? We're going out for pints. This guy is an absolute genius. He's positioned himself in such an awkward angle, I couldn't get him. He did it on purpose. I'm a shotgunner. Nope. I didn't cock a shotgun. Now I'm a shotgunner. It's a really bad company. We've done a ton of changes. I kind of got lumped with some stuff that wasn't my wheelhouse and wasn't going anywhere. So she understands. Oh, nice one. Just got back from a massive curry and a nice bottle of Chablis. I don't know what that is. What is that? Is it a spirit? Is it a wine?
Got the fucker! Gotta reload! Watch my back!
Keep him off of me!
Reload my back. Reload my fire. White wine. Ooh, nice. I'm a red wine. Myself, I wouldn't really drink much white, but I appreciate a good... See, from a red wine perspective, I love sitting down with a nice bottle of it. I am uncultured. I am uncultured swine. I am a basic bitch. You know, you would think to look at me that, you know, I'm an incredibly fancy man, but I am not the fancy man. No. Give me rum, whiskey, cider, please. I also, not cider, but rum and whiskey I like, yeah. Swine. Bacon. Oh.
Enemy down!
That guy was not a well-trained soldier. He just ran and looked at me. Oh, crap. I didn't see him. He was just standing beside me. Every opportunity to kill me and decided not to. Is he dead?
Enemy down!
No, I died. I shouldn't have sang the song. Got some white snob friends. I do not like wine at all. Look up on the roof. No. Check. Nothing there. I forgot I had grenades. No. I started taking off my suppressor in front of him. I was like, oh, look what I can do. Dazzled him and they shot me. Nailed it. 100%. I am the most soldierish soldier in the world.
Reloading!
Got soldiers zipping over.
Got him!
Burn
Enemy
it
on
up,
the move!
burn it up. Do any of you ever do that thing as well? I know games like Tarkov will severely punish you for it, but you get into a habit in shooters to just reload after every break, even if you have plenty of ammo in your weapon. And it wasn't until I started playing the likes of Tarkov that they severely punish you for it, because if you reload and throw the clip, you lose all the ammo that's on it. Sir, what are you doing?
Tango down!
Snap. Yeah, if you quick reload in Tarkov, it drops a mine like that. Yeah, but that's a whole realism of Tarkov kind of. Marksman rifle.
Shotgunner coming in from the hallway. More tangos coming in from the zip line. Take cover.
Going in hot. Oh no, he's hot.
Moving up.
Throwing frag!
Hey, you just hold on to that for me, please. Thank you.
Got the fucker! Son of a
Well. Sounds like company.
That's the guy, Doodleman. That's the guy. I may have asked this before, but can you switch shoulders when aiming? Yes, you can. I just don't sometimes because I'm an old man and I don't like to change things. What's the campaign for this? Ultra aggro logging their wells or actual army folk? I think it's actual army folk, but I think I'm starting to get the impression that my guy's a bit unhinged.
You'd swear a storm.
This ain't a social visit.
He started off as generic Nolan North, and now he's
For you, bud. I'm not stuck
Deadpool
on
Nolan North.
You're stuck on you and me.
Another wave. Roger.
Gotta reload!
Did you see it just fell out of the background? Like, oh shit, no!
More snipers across the way. We're stuck here until we take them out. Take out those goddamn snipers, will you?
Why do I have to do it? Surely you guys work for me. Hold the refill. Is that a sniper rifle? It is. Nice one. Just gently walking about. And... Oh crap! Oh crap! Right. Okay. And I missed. There's no fucking slowdown on it. There's no max pain. Jehovah's Witness spreading a good word with an assault rifle would have been an interesting take. You know that's the new storyline in Final Fantasy VII.
More snipers.
If you play the
way.
remake,
We're stuck
you're
here
going
till we
about
take 'em
telling
out.
people about how Sephiroth is
Take out
Lord and
those
Savior.
goddamn snipers, will you?
You're a Jehovah Witness. Maybe if I take a wee bit of a back seat, I can swap him. I'm sorry, sir, but you got shot. So you have to lie down and stop your shenanigans. Love it, you. I love the fact that I'm actually ducking as well as I do this. The game's... Yeah, it's very beige and very grey. Got some interesting reading material for you. I like it. And then, unfortunately, your joke has now been stolen. And I will be claiming it for myself, and I'll tell people I made it up. But it's par for the course, that's what happens. This jabroni. Oh, I actually got him. That was not skill, that was luck. Okay, that one was a little bit skill. They'll did? They'll did. And they will believe you, your reputation of joke stretches far. Well, this is how I get them. I just steal them off people. But whenever he goes live tomorrow, I'll go into Ian's chat. Actually, I might save it for Friday Fantasy 7. I'll go into Ian's chat. I'll say it and he'll be, oh, Leyoric, you're so witty. And I'll be like, yes, I came up with that myself.
This is a mistake, Walker.
have to try, Colonel. It's the only way.
Colonel. That was slow reaction speeds, my friend.
Walker, what are you doing?
Adams?
You can't do this, man.
Oh, put the gun. Put it down. Nope. Ah, shit. I told him to put down the gun. Bon. I know. Wonder if I can shoot straight through. No. Aren't they the zipline? Defies the laws of nature. How did they actually set that up to go through a building as well?
I have to try,
Because it doesn't have a clear shot to the other side.
And you damn them all.
They must have had to slowly walk it through. Also, that's a different person now.
Damn it, Walker! No!
I could have just shot him.
Jesus. What the fuck did you do, Walker?
He was like that when I got here.
Caught me off guard.
Look, see, like it's not like a, you know, in the game where you shoot like the grappling rope gun because I can't even see the other side. I call shenanigans. This world is fake. This fake. Have intelligence. What? Big fan. Big fan.
You know, I hear what you guys are doing, and it just gets me to wondering, who goes around bashing people's heads in? With a gun, no less. It's unnecessary and impractical.
Laugh it up while
I
you can.
don't disagree with what he's saying.
I do.
Not only could you damage your weapon, but
Oh, swallow my gum.
it's a, you know, if you have intelligence, we're only that easy. That's how it works in real life. I walk around and I see, what's this? What's this? What's this? Oh, book. Oh, book. Gathered intelligence. No, it's not. That's not how it works.
Camping that roof.
I not now smart. Spoken good England.
Shit. Can't zip over till we clear it off.
Not a problem. Adams, you spot him. Lugo and I'll knock him down.
My kind of plan. Pick your mark, Captain. I got the other.
I'm gonna pop myself here, and then we're gonna. What's all the mannequins?
Waiting on you, Captain.
Tango down! Shit! More shooters coming out!
Are they having a barbecue?
Shot that guy? I like that guy.
You shot that guy. I like that guy. Awesome.
Turret! Right side!
Oh, you only had two more days
I'm reloading.
till retirement.
Only 2 more days of retirement. Riggs.
RPG and we're fucked! Take them out!
Damn it, Riggs.
RPG and we're fucked! Take them out!
I'm trying to kill this kid.
Enemy is TIA! Son of a bitch! Taking cover! Under heavy fire!
No. I got died.
There's our tower.
Lot of gun camping that roof.
Shit. Can't
Is
zip
there
over
a
till we
better
clear it
place
off.
to sit?
Not a problem. Adams, you spot him. Lugo and I'll knock
I
him
don't know if
down.
I could ship through these.
My kind of plan. Pick your mark, Captain. I got the other.
Now the guy walked up there and he was shooting with that gun. He was the issue.
Hostile is down!
Shit! More shooters coming out of the door in the back!
Nope. Look at the gunner first. I'm going to kick him out now, but he wasn't there previously.
Right side!
That guy? You shot that guy? I like that guy.
Enemy is TIA!
I think get him.
Oh, you only had 2 more days till retirement.
That was a headshot. You son of a bitch.
Eyes wide! Get down! RPG by the dance
I
floor!
wonder if I could get him with us. Nope, I just shot into the air. God damn it. Right, he's annoying me. He's looking over, so I should be able to pick him off. There we go. Well, this vertical video is weird. Yours isn't weird. The whole thing in general. You're welcome, and thank you very much for that. Why is the whole thing weird? I thought it was better cropped. Also, hello.
What are you doing? Hostile is dead.
Shit! I need some cover here!
Turret! Shoot out the window.
You can switch it back to classic mode as well.
Hostile is
Oh, you little bastard. I killed you previously. Fucker.
He had a wife and kids.
Breathe easy.
Oh,
That's
someone,
all of them.
please think of the children.
I don't know who this is on the radio, but I think it's class. Kind of air prep picking him up, so it's fleeting visit at the minute, I'm afraid. No problem. How'd he get on with his trip? Did he impress the big boss? Big
You guys
boss.
are coming to clean this up, right?
got those fuckers.
It's like a watermelon after Gallagher got
Trying to think his flight just landed. Ooh,
I guess
finish.
hilarious. Ah, jeez. Where's all this violence
You alright, buddy?
coming from,
You alright?
man?
You okay?
The video games. I bet it's the video games.
He's just drawing. He's just messing about the sound down there. Some crack. And about in the job. Burning it up. Burning it up. I
Borrowed time, gentlemen.
the
No and Conrad. Reinforcements are en route as we speak. This is all you, Lugo. I want that radio 5x5 in less than 2. You got me?
Don't worry about me. I can do my fucking job.
Monkey. Queen V, what's happening? Morning there. How is Wednesday evening? It is grand. Time travel. Mental. It's Thursday for you, isn't it? You up? You getting a nice coffee? You starting work? How's your day been? Pick up intelligence. This is where I get my intelligence. The bathroom. What are they playing? Looks like Resident Evil. Do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do. I got my green tea and start work at 7 a.m. It's 7:46 now. All systems are slow, but great start. Let's take it easy. Thursday. It's almost the weekend. Like, it's technically the pre-weekend now. I gotta go. Hopefully we'll be back on later. Have a great stream. Sierra, thank you very much for calling on. I appreciate you, buddy. I'll see you later. As well, anyone off on Queen V. Playing through the Metal Gear Solid games at the moment. She is... Oh. Where are we? Where are we? What's happening here? What's happening here? Cutscene. She is from New Zealand and is good people. But for us, it would be normally very early in the morning you would see her stream.
Clock's ticking, Lugo.
Yeah, I'm on it. This deck's custom, so I'm gonna need a minute.
On the road to 500 followers in your birthday. I think we just skipped your birthday as well.
Joe. That's just a cloud echo. We hear that shit all the time.
There's Big Boss.
It's,
There he is.
off the stone wall.
Hey now, check out the Whiz Kid.
Yeah, that was textbook. You're the guy who built a citywide broadcast system with spare parts. That's impressive.
Oh, well, you know.
Thank you very much as well for the gigantified boss. It's the only way we should look at Big Boss.
How far does this thing really go?
To infinity and beyond. Or the storm wall. Same difference.
Now you're just fucking with me.
Oh, ye of little faith. You are live and on the air, my good man. Give it a shot.
Well, just don't cut it.
It's
Doesn't it?
easier than I expected. Thanks.
Big like Metal Gear.
Get the fuck off me, man! Have you lost your fucking mind?
Are you really this fucking naive? He kept the 33rd on our ass this whole time. He wasn't gonna let us just walk out of here. I did what was necessary.
You don't get to make that call!
Well, fuck you. I just did.
That's enough! We'll deal with this later. To anyone who can hear me, I'm the commander of an American evacuation force. We're here to rescue you. But first, the 33rd will pay for what they've done.
I'm disappointed in you, Walker. No one leaves Dubai. I tried. 1,300 men, women, children dead because of my arrogance. And now you want to finish off the rest? If you will not learn from my mistakes, then there's nothing
My character is in a bad way. Nathan Drake has seen better days.
That helo's our only way off this roof. There's a lot of gun between here and there.
Into the tower. Move. You two go. I'll cover you from here.
Like hell.
There's no time to argue. Now go.
Lugo's right. Come on.
Thank you for shooting. Not a problem. I enjoy your
Lugo,
streams.
the
I don't get
second
to
we reach
I
that
don't get to
helo,
see
you
them
start
all the
running.
time because I am
Don't worry about me. Just
stuck in the
get
office
there.
some days, and when I'm in the office, I can't be a lurky. This looks like intelligence. Oh, the water gun.
Looks up. We've got movement.
No movement. Let me do the thing. Adams. Ooh, you are a
Tango down!
chunky boy.
Okay, you're good. Let's do this.
These guys are well armored. Ooh, execute. Sir?
Got another one.
Keep him off me for a sec.
What was that?
We're almost outside, Lugo.
Are we almost outside? That seems like the door's going to explode.
In the doorway.
Oh, I shouldn't have just stood there like an agent. Oh well. As if you only have one life. As gamers, we have many. We've done that.
Lugo, the second we reach that helo, you start running.
Don't worry about me. Just get there.
Here we go. Tango down! Keep him off me for a sec.
I want the P90 because I like it.
Fuck you.
I'm so aggressive.
We're almost outside, Lugo.
They're already waiting for you.
Right, so I'm waiting here then. Maybe have a wee grenade, something.
In the doorway. These Zulu guys ain't fucking around.
Oh no. Where'd we go? Where's everybody?
Just give me a got another one. Got another on the stairs.
I like the fact that when you throw a frag grenade, it's sand that goes everywhere because that's what the ground is made of. Instead of there just being a generic explosion. I'm gonna have to check to see if it does that for everything else as well, or if it's just sand everywhere.
Just give me a target.
Nice. I was accidentally good there.
Got him.
Hostile with a shotgun coming our way. Watch yourselves.
Gotta reload.
I can help, boss. Just give me a target.
Oh, am I supposed to be calling these guys out? Murdering them all myself? Kill him. Go. His head exploded. No, this is my chair. You find somewhere else to sit.
Let's do this.
Sticky out.
Where's my fucking backup?
No, don't stab me. What the fuck you doing? Ah, I got died because he stabbed me. Gee leg. Da-da-da-da-da-da, itchy go leg. Let's start him way
Lugo,
back
the
up
second
here.
we reach that helo, you start running.
Don't worry about me. Just get there.
We've got contact.
Hostile! Gotta reload.
Is there a man to kill? Nope. Nope. No kills. No kills.
We're almost outside, Lugo!
I also enjoy the fact in these games that you can only ever, any one time, carry 2 weapons. I would be carrying as many as possible.
Everyone, get ready.
Frag out!
Contact, open fire.
These guys ain't fucking around! Hostile dead!
Where would you put them though? I would just hang them off my back and stuff. I would dangle them everywhere. They would be dangly weapons.
We're Oscar Mike!
What's Oscar Mike?
Sticky out!
Help, boss! Just give me a target!
Oh, it stuck him!
Got another
Oh, poor fella. Felt a little bit bad about that one. He just kind of panicked and ran. But it was stuck to him.
Push forward! Fucking move!
He just turned around and run back up the stairs.
Move up! Let's go!
Doo-doo-doo-doo.
Got more coming from the balcony! I got you covered!
And another one. And another one.
Waiting on your target.
Tango down! Reloading!
I honestly think they've taken a lot of the lines from Uncharted and just stuck it on here.
Okay, he's dead.
Eyes on that
Oh,
target!
the game's fake. Game's fake. Game's fake. Shenanigans. I shot him in the head with a bullet there now, and my bullets didn't go down by one.
Moving from cover!
It's all fake. I don't believe a word of it now. Bullshit.
Hostile
Does that blow up?
coming our way! Keep looking at yourselves! It's too hot!
Kill the shooter by the fuel tank!
Watch your right side!
He was just going to spawn no matter what.
Lugo, clear these guys out! Say please!
Sergeant!
Yes, sir!
Fake. May as well turn it. Yeah. Yeah, I want a refund. I want a refund. Shenanigans.
Moving! Reinforcements inbound!
Come here!
Brr, 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 what the hell?
Shit! Tango with a knife headed our way!
Wait. You know what? It's actually quite effective because every time he runs at me, I have to reload.
Kill the shooter by the fuel tanks! Got the fucker! Ah, son of a bitch! Throw in a sticky!
I run along the avenue.
Kill the shooter by the fuel tanks!
You got a clear path to the heat!
I thought that was actually quite clever the way he was identifying where they were, but I think he just shouts it for everyone because there's fuel tanks here. Run to the helo. Shoot the big tank. Does it work?
Walker, over here!
I don't think it works.
Keep him off me for a sec!
Probably when I get in the helicopter it'll work.
Start her up, Adams.
Right. Come on, come on, come on!
Lugo, time to
Come on.
haul ass!
Already on the move! Cover me! Here they come! On the move!
Oh, cool noise.
Shoot me!
Ah, no, it works.
RPG, watch out!
As part of the game, they were just like, we want to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. How can we do that? Easy. Just get a helicopter and a Gatling gun. But we can't lift it because it's not strong enough, but you can just be on the side of the helicopter and just murderize people. Who's she shooting at?
Roof is clear. Get downstairs.
Where's my fucking cover fire?
Vic, turn it again. Turn it off twice. Can it be any more turned off? The destructible environments on this are quite good, you know. They're not like bad company level, but you know, they're decent. Who the hell's shooting at him? Oh, RPG. Which one is it? Copper Lugo's escape.
The 33rd don't want to leave Dubai? Fine. We'll bury them here.
Hello in Dubai. It's not good for the environment, is it? All these trees collapsing.
Circle around by the pool, Adams.
What? Why?
I want to see what this gun can do.
Yeah, I think I've lost my fucking... Ooh, big TV. As horrific and brutal as this is, that would actually be pretty good to play some better games on. Big TV. Oh, I broke it. Quick, leave. I broke it. I fucking broke the TV.
There, take us in low.
Fine. Just hold on. Got another turret in the front.
You hear that, Adams? Bring us around.
Shit.
Okay, now circle around. I want to send Conrad a message.
What do you mean?
Just do it.
What, like a text message or something on WhatsApp?
Give me one more push. I need an angle on that generator.
Whatever you say, Walker.
Right, can I bring on this push? And I like the fact that they call it a minigun. I'm fucking mini about it. This is fine. You can fix it. I don't want Sky.
Jesus. You ever seen a thing like that?
No, but Conrad has. I hope he was paying
Great
attention.
Escape is the name of that achievement.
Adams, get us the fuck out of here. Yes, sir.
Shit! What is it? We got company!
These guys are not looking well at all. I think my guy's missing an ear.
Wait, this isn't right.
Well, it's too
Oh, is this about from the start of the game?
I mean, we did this already.
What do you mean?
Ah, fuck it. It's nothing. Just shake
We
these
did
fucking
this
guys.
already. What's going on? All rough around the edges. All of the edges. They're so rough around the edges, they're now smooth again. We literally did this at the start of the game, so what is going on?
Adam, punch it.
Sidewinder! Headed right for us!
My God!
Shoot that fucking missile!
Holy shit!
Help me!
Too close, Walker. Take this guy out.
Is this game secretly Groundhog Day? I'm starting to think that because this is the opening of the game as well.
Doesn't matter. Just keep it steady.
Another missile locked on! Jesus, shoot it! Shoot it!
I got it. Calm down. Will Mario pop up now?
Oh shit! Is that what I think it is?
What is it? What do you think it is? Your name is Jesus, apparently. Jesus, shoot it. I know, Jesus.
Find out.
What do you mean, Look, this is the first thing you're playing this game? Are you okay? Wait, what? What? Back to spreading the good word. Fucking hell. That's what I call her legs, the good word. Holy smokes. Right, okay. Is it going to start make me redo the start of it then?
Captain Walker.
What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to take a quick break, because thankfully it's a 360 game, so everything is pausable. It's pausable in high ability. Just because we're about to head on the ads and I can't snooze them anymore. So I'm going to take a quick break and I'll be back in a wee second, but I'm going to run them and we're going to do our Vote of Kings. So it's exclamation mark vote 1 for the first game, exclamation mark vote 2 for the second one. We're going to see which of our random games comes out on top. And I'll see you in a bit.
When the silence falls, empty throne waiting, something's building in the air, voices rising, the battle lines are drawn to your side, no going back now. Cast your vote of kings, crown the one that rules your heart. Vote of kings, tear the old world apart. Which legend takes the throne? Cast your vote of kings. Soldiers from distant lands, crystals and blades colliding, stealth through shadows, time itself rewinding. The battle lines are drawn, choose your side, history in your hands. Cast your vote of kings, crown the one.
What's the Elvish word for friend?
Which legend takes the throne? Cast your vote of kings. 7 versus 8, snake versus shine, time, every memory at stake. Remember when we first believed, gives us strength to prophecy. Now decide what kingdoms bleed. Cast your vote of kings, crown the one that rules your heart. Vote of kings.
Welcome back, folks. Man, what is happening? Welcome on. Let's see. So what won? Breath of the Wild? I don't even know what I was up against. I did see Dark Souls and Final Fantasy 7 at one point. Well played, well played. Eddie, was that you? Did you influence it? Did you influence it? But what is the crack, man? How is it going? I'm assuming it's pretty early for yourself as well. It was up against Final Fantasy 7. I don't agree with the result, but I have to respect the democratic process. I had my part. Let's see, 7 versus Zelda. It's a toughie. It's a toughie. Very, very dedicated fans on both sides. Very, very dedicated fans. But you know what? Fair play. Because I do enjoy Breath of the Wild as well. And I did like Tears of the Kingdom. I have to try that Zelda game, which, to be honest, annoyed me a bit. Because every single Legend of Zelda game, Legends of Zelda, main character is called Link. So whenever the Zelda became the main character, they should have called it The Legend of Link. Just saying. Needs to be fair. We're playing Spec Ops Line. I think we're going mad.
Can you hear me?
But we're going to see. We're going to find out. Colonel.
Open your eyes, Walker. I need you to see what you've done.
I didn't do anything. I can't prove it.
Long ago. We were ordered to abandon these people. Instead, we chose damnation.
Not all of us.
What? Who's there?
One of your victims.
I was going to do the Metal Gear Solid 3 thing where I see everybody I murdered.
You gave us no choice.
There was always a choice. You just fucked it up.
Oh, man, thank you very much for the 100 bats. I didn't know what that noise was for a wee second. But I appreciate you. Thank you very much.
We tried to save you.
Shamrock 100.
Deep down.
Oh, there's TTS on it. I didn't even know there was TTS on it.
This wasn't my fault.
It was your fault, Walker. Yes.
Lugo.
Help. There were over 5,000 people alive in Dubai the day before you arrived. How many are alive today, I wonder? How many
7.
will be alive tomorrow? I thought my duty was to protect this city from the storm. I was wrong.
What's the crack with the storm as well, do we know? There just seems to be a persistent storm around the city.
God damn it, Walker. If
God
you're
damn it.
alive, then fucking answer me.
Colonel.
What? It's Adams. Fuck, man. Where the hell are you?
Oh, shit, there actually is people buried in sand.
Lugo with you?
Right, okay.
Nah, he's been dark since the helo went down.
Fuck.
There's a boat.
Well, where are you?
Let's follow the smoke.
All right, I'm heading your way.
Seems like there'd be intelligence in here. And there's not. There's zero intelligence. That might be my guy. Where did I get Desert Eagle from? No! Oh, headshot. Adams is down. No. Oh, these guys hit hard. It's taking a fair wee bit to take him down, too. I need to get the Adams. Need to get him. Need to get him. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Get up, soldier. Oh.
This should help. Can you move?
Gonna need a minute. Let's keep these guys on my ass.
I'll deal with the 33rd. You just get your shit together. That's another one!
That's another one. I don't like that. There's occasions where I've been behind cover, and because I'm not leaning against cover, they're able to hit me. This doesn't make a huge amount of sense. Oh, you filthy little scoundrel. And also I shot you, so you shouldn't have been able to throw that grenade.
Keep him off me for a sec!
I have grenades. Yes.
You got knocked the fuck out, man!
I did. I did. You are correct in what you say. Where's my scar? No, I don't mean the one on my face. I mean my weapon. My ammo. Pretty much everything.
Grenade! Incoming!
What are you doing? What's Adams? There's my scar. That's what I'm looking for.
Throw in a frag! They're flanking! Adams, watch my goddamn back! God, this is slowing me down.
No. Why? All right, I get him. I get him. I'll get him this time. I'll get him this time. Gonna get my scar. Grenade.
Eyes on that shotgun.
They're flanking! Adams, watch my goddamn back!
Taking him down. I
Gotta reload! Watch my back!
Get down. Oh, it's annoying me. He's not diving behind cover. He's just standing looking at it. Oh, this is nice cover. This is nice. I like it. I like it a lot.
Pay attention to that shotgun.
Okay. You're all getting grenades. You get a grenade. You get a grenade. Everybody gets a grenade.
They're flanking! Adams, watch my goddamn back!
Taking him down. I got your back.
It's when they get to the point where they're starting to throw grenades that's kind of getting me a bit. My lack
Kill
of
is
aim.
fucking confirmed!
Kill confirmed. Kill tactic. Kill and job. Shot him with
Tell me what you want. Treat, bitch. Oh, excuse me? No. What do you say? Bitch. No. No. I'm not gonna give you a treat if you call me that. What do you say? Please. 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 Bitch. Please.
There she is already. Shambles. She had to wait long enough. I know. Disgraceful hook. Disgraceful. Thank God you're here. Thank God you're here. Because. She's something. After. Does she know? Does she know? Does she know? We take this out silently. You guys say nothing. You say nothing there. We'll do it quietly. Nobody fucking move. So just complacent. She doesn't know what's going on yet. She has no idea. She's fast asleep. Her ears are up because she's cozy. She knows. Hey. Good. There we go. There's your Uncle Hook. Got you that one. I know. I know he did. Good girl. She's like, I got my treat. I need it. Man. We'll go back to murdering people. That was just a wee wholesome moment that is ruined now by all this combat and murder. Uncle Hook, I like it. What the fuck? Sir, here it seems they glitch a wee bit, so it doesn't seem to let you get into that corner. And murder! No, I was the one that got murdered. I was the one who died. I'm going to keep my grenades for that one then.
Shotgun headed this way.
Fucking hell. This is hook there should redeem for you to get a treat, and I kind of agree. Would you like to change the difficulty? In other words, Leyoric, you suck. No. I'm trying to be good. Trying to be as good as possible. I am 2 pounds away from being just overweight instead of obese. I'm going to get that goal. I'm going to get it. I'm going to get it. I'm going to win. I'm going to win. And then I'm going to destroy my body at Christmas with all the alcohol and booze. Just go buy a big box of Tunics tea kicks and that'll be me. No boo. Only yay. You're fucking going to get it. Jesus. That was a bit of a sexual threat there, Hook. You're going to you. Nicely done. You see, Teddy, I had a friend as well that was going to the gym with me, but he decided to abandon me. Abandoned me, he did. And what was worse is he lived right beside the gym. And I had to drive like 20-30 minutes to get there. And he just abandoned me.
Watch your ass! Heavy moving in!
Fuck's sake, not this gym story again. It's not even a gym story, it's just what happened.
Bring your fucking head down! I'll push him out. Just keep his head down.
Got it, motherfucker. I think we're clear for now. We need to keep moving. Can you walk?
I'm fine.
Good. We need to find Lugo, then we take care of Conrad. I think we can still save these people, and I'm not gonna let him stand in our way.
I'm going to get rid of the Desert Eagle though.
Great so far.
This is a bit shit.
Your opinion, Lieutenant.
Wouldn't I just take one of the jeeps and get out of there? How's he getting on? You were dying a wee second ago. How are you running? Video game logic. I stayed out of fire for like 30 seconds and my health completely regenerated. That's why in this game there's no need for hospitals.
Where the hell are you guys? I'm pinned down in Conrad's backyard. I got no weapon, and my fucking arm's broke.
Lugo! Lugo!
He's a one-man army.
Signal puts him somewhere north of here.
That's a start. Let's move.
What is with all the massive boats? Oh, see this? This is typical 360 era tomfoolery. As soon as you see all these bits of cover, you know, alright, this is going to be a firefight.
Need to get closer. We're gonna take them.
Put him down! Gotta reload! Watch my back! Shut him down!
Shut him down! They're going down. Everybody's down. Going down. We're not going, unlike the K-pop Demon Hunters, we're not going up, we're going down. Down. We're at Lincoln Park.
Grenade! That's one!
Shit. He does not like to move at speed. Would you stop dodging my bolts? That man was an absolute miracle. Can I zoom in? Heavy fire. On the move. Oh, nice pump. It annoys me how accurate these guys are. Like from a stupid range, they are popping me no more. I've got an infinite health, apparently. Just stop there halfway through. Have I been shot? Yes, you have.
Fuck you! He's dead! This is slowing me down.
Do you ever see the Monty Python skit where they're in Africa and one of the guy's legs got eaten by a tiger? Or a lion? And they just come in, they're all, we don't hear. He's all, oh, it looks like something snuck into my tent in the middle of the night and ate my leg. Are you okay? Well, it stings a little, but it's okay. He's all, and they look and they're all, oh my God. And they're looking at his mosquito net. They're all, oh my God, there's a massive hole in here. Well, we must take action. And you think, oh, they're going to hunt down the animal. No. We're going to repair this mosquito net. That'll stop him coming back. The one, I mean, like, yeah, that's it. Fucking phenomenal. Monty Python comedy, so good.
We're Oscar Mike!
Get your motherfucking asses into cover!
I don't appreciate their management style. They use a lot of bad language, and I don't think it's indicative of a positive workplace.
Shotgun headed this way! Hostile dead!
I dare to say, if I use that sort of language in my team at work, HR would be called immediately.
Fucking hell! That's all of them. Walker, Adams, you guys still out there?
We read you, Lugo.
Oh, thank fucking Christ.
Where are you now?
Holed up in some half-buried yacht.
Yes.
With the pissed-off soldiers swarming around it. Can't miss it.
All right, keep out of sight. I'm coming to get you.
Gotta move, Walker. Patrol headed this way.
Yes, of course.
2 o'clock! Hostile shooting from that hole!
Take cover!
Moving target!
Kill is fucking confirmed!
Eyes on that hostile! We're moving from cover!
Damn it! I gotta reload!
Fucking move! It's too hot!
Could I not?
We've got contact!
Can I stay up here? I can stay up here. Oh, I don't want this though. I want the sniper rifle. Like, how much damage does this thing do? Where are they all? Lads? Lads? Oh, they're all hiding until I jump down.
On the move! 2 o'clock! Hostile shooting from that hole!
Take cover! He's dead!
I'll have to reload every time. No.
Fuck you!
Walker! We got one out in the open!
Reloading!
Do you remember Dark Sector in the 360? I loved that game. For some reason, I can picture the box, but I never played it. There was a few other ones as well, wasn't there? There was a Vanquish. I think there's one too. So there's a whole pile of really good action games came out in the 360.
Fuck!
Oh,
We got another sniper!
kind of cover-based shooters, like, but they were great.
That's another one!
I'll save this one for you. Let's go, baby.
Pay attention to that shotgun!
I don't like this where they mix up both their ranged and their close quarters. Because it really throws off my strategy of just hiding back and shooting at them. And I've got nothing.
Can't fucking move! It's too hot!
Oh, that's my guy. Shit. Ah, shit. Ah, shit. Or do you remember Bulletstorm? That was a game where you had to be as stylish as possible. I love Bulletstorm.
God damn it!
Bulletstorm was an epic.
Got
One moving. Does this take me to the other side? Oh, no, this takes me. That's around the bottom of this. Okay, okay, so I could have went that way as well. Now we know. Knowing is half the battle. Where's everybody? I'm here for the murder.
Cover me! I'm reloading! Enemy down!
Look at the all their armor. That's not really fair. I don't really appreciate that. Hello? I think I might keep some of them for later. I can kind of cheat and kind of wall hack a wee bit.
Shotgunner! Bang out!
Target neutralized.
That's another one!
I'm getting loads of achievements, so I'm quite liking that. Something like I don't really back my achievements on my Xbox too much for that, but I enjoy getting them. It's a yacht of enemies.
Once the area is secure.
It is. It is. They must have been on sale. Sir. It's the key to the whole thing.
Gonna pull through this.
Just really struck a chord.
We both lived through worse.
You know damn well that's not what I'm talking about.
There's something on your mind. Why don't you say it already so we can get back to
Leyoric. I don't have the brains.
Ready, what is happening? Can he play the piano? I don't know. Can he play the piano? Much like in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, where you have to learn pretty much to play piano. Lamush, what's happening? Your wife was on earlier telling us that she was picking you up from the airport. How was the trip?
Jesus Christ.
What the fuck happened to
Fuck me.
No, I don't want to. Lamush, no. I've told you before, no.
I see. My mistake.
Is he missing an eye? I just home now. Flight was terrible and a lot of turbulence. Oh, the weather's a bit shit, isn't it?
Get to that yacht.
Thank you very much, Hook, as well, for doing the shout-outs. Up tier mod, look at him. I give him grief all the time, but he's class. What? You little bastard. Ah, I got greedy. It's snowing over there too. Really heavy. We kept getting weather warnings for it, but over here there was a bit of sleet earlier, but nothing too bad. Kind of have it that if it gets really bad, I'm not going to go into the office tomorrow, but I'm going to have to wait and see.
Striker heading our way.
Get to that yacht.
Yeah.
Throw in flashbang. Sticky grenade out.
Shit! Tango with a knife headed our way. I'm moving.
Sticky grenade out.
Jesus Christ. I was looking at the window during the meeting and reassured me that no flights were stopping. But that makes sense if you know the meeting was what. Inside joke though, it'll fly over people's heads. Whee! Look has been corrupted. Yay! Well, it was a good trip otherwise.
Heavy trooper is fucking dead.
He did. Sir?
Grenade! Incoming!
Cunt. Right. Lad, let's go.
Got him!
I'll replace the ARPA hook. I know we're going to have to do one for him. It was an okay trip. You would have rather stayed at home. Could have done without it. Yeah. That makes sense.
Heads up. Sandstorm's moving in.
What's Adams? Sorry. Sorry, sir. Sorry. I'm back! Sarah, welcome back. I forgot you're the whole other way up in the country, so it doesn't actually take you long to come back from the airport, because you were saying I might call in. But for us, it's like an hour and a half. Yeah, depending on weather, it can take fucking ages. 20 minutes from where we live. See, that's handy. No, for us, it takes a while. Sir, if you could stop moving, that would be wonderful. There we go. Got him. Oh, you grenady little cunt. I don't have any other weapons. Oh no, I do. How about? Don't be trying to... Sir. Sir. I'm trying to pick up ammo. Would you gentlemen... Stop. Stop. International is cheaper. Shoot that guy. Happy Irish, what's happening? 20 quid for 20 minutes to pick up and drop off point? Oh, that's some bullshit. This is some bullshit right there. 20 quid for 20 minutes? You're going to actually make me do the whole thing. Oh, you...
Striker heading our way.
Get to that yacht.
Yeah.
Throw it free!
You know the drill.
Enemy down! Reloading!
£4 for less. Is there any way you can park outside of there now?
Heavy troopers fucking down!
Taking heavy fire!
Aye. That can't be some sort of excuse or make something up as to why I didn't have to pay. They're all like, I'm here to pick up the Flemish. If you don't let me in for free, he will destroy this airport on his Twitch. No, no, don't say that. Don't say that. That's maybe don't phrase it like that. Vengeance! The Flemish. What's the story of this game? The story of the game is... The other half of me, that's more important than that. I know. So, I think the character's gone mad because we've reloved the opening scene a couple of times. And he was like, no, we've already done this. And they're like, no, we haven't. It was like Groundhog Day a little bit. And then he keeps seeing things, hearing things, hallucinating. He's lost his fucking mind. Right, I'm going to go over here and pick up ammo. Apparently I'm not picking up ammo. Nope, nope. Actually, you know what? I'll just pick up the big gun. Oh, nope. Excuse you, sir? Exactly. I should have. 20 quid, like that's steep. For 20 minutes of parking. I would expect a week and a half of that. And they must know they're taking advantage a little bit because it's just people picking people up from the airport, and it's not it's not their fault if the flight's late or delayed and they have to pay even more. No shit, it's extortion. It is. It is. Tango on the boat. Aren't you glad I brought this big gun? Oh, you little bastard. And another one. See, you say they've got nowhere to run, but they really do. They have a whole desert to run in. To be fair, you walked out from me. Don't put me back. Don't put me the whole way back. Don't do it. Don't do it. You son of a bitch. And another one.
Get to that yacht.
Yeah.
Throw in a sticky!
You know the drill.
Throw in a sticky! Throw it free! Kill is fucking confirmed.
Someday.
Finally!
I'm gonna go over and get this weapon early. Just fucking wreck this. Come back!
Reloading! Keep him off of me!
They're crap.
Heads up. Sandstorm's moving in.
Just what we fucking need.
Could be. Now, dig in and get ready.
Moving target! One more down!
Could be Adams. Could be anybody.
Enemy down!
I don't know how he's down. But he is.
He's wide open!
Adam.
On the move! Tango down! Hold
Tango.
your shit together,
Yeah.
Adams. We can take these fuckers. Once the storm clears, the battle will be moving. Gotcha. Then never mind.
He shot that guy in the ass. Adams, you almost got pegged there, kid. Not in the fun way. And your gun is mine. Thank you, sir. Nice.
That's all of them. You feel better now?
Not even close. Let's just
That
get
was
Lugo.
annoying.
For me. Get him on the radio. Tell him we're clear.
I'll keep the sniper, I suppose. It's handy.
Adams.
Adams.
Oh shit.
Lugo, what's happening?
Fuck. I need help. They're closing in. Oh shit.
Talk to us, Lugo.
What the fuck? Just stay the fuck away from me. Get back. Get the fuck back.
Lugo, you still there? Lugo!
Seconda리 거리. 네. 보스. 보스 Ben Apcon. You fucking bastards.
Run!
What's he saying?
Get ready.
Oh, fuck, they're hanging him.
The rope! Shoot the rope! Everyone back, now! Come on, Lugo. Get your ass up!
You heard him! Back up right now!
Civilians.
Back the fuck up! Hurry up, Walker!
Breathe, Lugo!
They ain't taking a hit!
God damn it, breathe!
How's he doing? Answer me, Walker!
Come on, Lugo!
Is he breathing? Move back, or I will open fire!
Damn it.
Oh, he's dead.
Walker, they're boxing us in!
Damn it, Lugo!
You better fucking pray he makes it. Let me take him, Walker. Sir, permission to open fire.
They are unarmed civilians. No.
Walker, give me the fucking word.
Yeah, I'm not gonna shoot these people. Oh, it's not gonna let me do it. You actually gonna make me kill them?
Go! While you still can.
Technically, I didn't shoot them. I just shot up in the air and they ran away. I don't think any of them are dead either. There we go. Whew. That was going to make me perform a fucking war crime. I didn't go near your daughter, buddy. Calm yourself down.
There's our exit.
About damn time.
Ian, welcome on. What's happening? Sure, there he is
Sure,
himself.
there he is. And the 7th anniversary. Confirmed the best anniversary.
That is, of all the
Finding
anniversaries.
Leyoric in another person's chat is not, shall we say, the rarest.
This is the method to make me
gym
slag
badge
you
up.
audibly. This is true. And I deserved it. I
You'll
deserved
usually
every bit.
find him somewhere making dad jokes, you know? Yeah, but like you're one of those like shiny ones that everyone has because they were like in a special drop event or something like that, you know?
All the shade, all the shade.
I'm gonna kill every
Appreciate
last
it.
one of you.
Thank you very much, Ian, for coming on. What's happening?
I'm gonna kill you. Sergeant Lugo is dead.
This game is getting
For
really,
that, I
really
will
deep.
give no quarter. You brought this on yourself.
And I know we all do anyway. Doing good, man. What about you? I'm doing brilliant. But if you're not following Ian, he is an absolute legend, fellow Irish streamer. Plays a lot of
okay?
Final Fantasy games, playing Tormented Souls and World of Warcraft. Weirdly enough, at the moment.
To Lugo isn't our fault.
That's a fair reason to do that. This is
tell
true.
me what
This is
I
true.
already know.
And here I thought Ian was
Lugo's
nice. Ian
blood's
is
on
nice.
your
He just
hands,
it's just not to me because I don't deserve it.
Bang.
Conrad deserves to die. You know that.
And what do we deserve?
I think we both know the answer to that.
Would you go away? Why am I going away? No, no, I won't.
So, how we gonna do this?
Kill everything that fucking moves.
Sounds like a plan.
Fair. Fair play. Fair play. Oh, it's a code red. Oh shit, code red. It's like the worst of the codes. I wonder if I could just run on here. I can just run on here. Ooh, ammo. What weapons do we have? What if I want the sniper in here? No, we'll waste it. We'll waste it. That's every fucking bullet. Right, sir, can I have a word? I want to speak to your manager.
Kill is fucking confirmed.
Look at the scar. Got one moving. That's me. Yeah, so had a buzzy enough day in the office today. The weather's taking a bit of a turn, but thankfully it's nowhere near as bad as they kind of predicted. So I'm kind of hoping it stays a bit clear for tomorrow because in the office, I don't want to have to travel if it's frosty and snowy. Yet, I don't know. I think we would have got it already if it was going to be bad. I'm also in the office. I'll see you in the office then. We'll have lunch. Wait a minute. You're in a different office. There are other offices. I could dump the office for the week. Oh no! I enjoy that. I enjoy that when you get to the part of the week, unless you're on a Friday, where you're done with the office for the week, and you know that the rest of your week is going to be spent at home. And what I love about it is you get up at your own, not you get up at your own time, but you get up at your own kind of pace. You get washed, you get showered, you get the coffee on, and it's not the shitty coffee, it's the nice coffee you make yourself. That's good. It's good. I already gave him a wee shout out, but thank you very much. Ian deserves double shout outs. Because he's not afraid to talk about his hate of me. And, you know, I respect him for that. Most people shy away from it. Most people are like, oh, that Leyoric guy is such a character. Where Ian is straight up, Leyoric's a prick. Fucking hate him. You know, and I like his honesty. I like his honesty. Unfiltered, like a lovely cup. Oh, well. I would say filter your coffee. Definitely filter your coffee. Don't leave your coffee unfiltered with butts in it. Throwing is sticky.
That's another one.
And another.
Throwing is sticky.
Just Ian sitting down with his unfiltered coffee in the morning. And he's just like, ooh. Getting all the bits out of it.
Damn it, Walker! Get these guys off me!
No. There was a better gun. Why did you left the handgun? You need to pay attention to me.
That's what.
Oh, actually, they're pretty good there. Fair play. Oh, you can flip the turret. Forgot about that. Get to the chopper. He ran away. Which, you know, strategy-wise is great, but... Oh, crap. Get behind cover. Get shot. The movie.
Fuck you.
Oh, we lovely grenade would have been nice. Right, where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Sir, sir. Stand up. Come on, you have to stand up for yourself. And for me, so I can hit you. No! That darn internet airbot coming in here and ruining our viewing. He's trying to sell me the best viewers. Sell me his lovely art. Execute him. I don't know why I get more ammo if I execute them. I know it's probably to encourage you to do it in the game, but from a from like a narrative viewpoint, I get more ammo from executing somebody. It's like, they're extra dead now. You get extra bullets. 5 followers cheap. It actually auto-modded it. Oh. I feel the best viewer thing's basically dead, thankfully. I haven't seen it in ages. I see it in some other people's streams, but SiriBot is very good at catching them. Like, very good at catching them. I'm intelligent. I'm so smart. No. But we had the discussion about the other night, right? And we were just like, I don't understand the point of it, though. What does it do? Like, see when you're buying follows and you're like, oh, I've gone from 200 follows to 2,000. But it doesn't affect your viewership. It doesn't add anything to the chat.
Welcome to hell, Walker.
What's this?
Waiting for you.
I've been waiting for this pay. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm on fire. I'm not in the cool way that the kids talk about.
Another shot from that mortar and we're fucked.
I reckon it's a push up the list in the category for visibility. Does it? I can understand people paying for actual viewers. I mean, I don't get it. Yeah. But at least it makes a difference. But it just does it for the stats. It doesn't. I suppose they're doing. It's different reasons for people for getting into streaming. I suppose they're doing it for the.
Reloading! Keep him off me!
For the stats and stuff, not the actual banter of the stream. You know, each to their own. To be fair, like, but I don't really get it myself. Yeah, they are. Just shoot the sandbag. Son of a... Look. They just need to stop judging them. They have a tough life with tiny dicks. Did I mention tiny dicks? Wait a minute. Do I buy viewers? Did I buy Riddy and the internet? I did. I did buy them. You hit this and pay you there. It pays all of us. Truth is out. Truth is out. Thank you, Hook. Thank you for paying for them. I cheap dicks. I'm a bot. You've been playing the long game, Riddy. I'm playing the long game. I respect it. I'll buy your viewers then. I'll buy your cheap viewers. How cheap are the viewers as well? I've never actually... Oh, I'm dead. I'm dead. Gosh. I've never actually... Pretty cheap. I've never actually looked under the price of them. Like... Do you pay per viewer or do you buy like a pack? And do they all just show up at the one time? In which case it looks really sus. Like, oh, I've just gone live and I already have 500 people watching. Or, shit. You little bastard. I'm alright, dude. I got nosy and had a look one day. You buy like a bulk of 100. And what do? Do they chat in your chat, or they just sit there?
Oh, son of a bitch!
Like, what is the actual point of them?
Gotta take out that nest! Cover me! I'm reloading! Enemy down!
They just sit there? What's the fucking point then? Like, is that not really sus as well? If you went onto somebody's chat and they have like 500 people and nobody's talking.
Shut your fucking mouth! Shut the fuck up, you cunt!
Kill is fucking confirmed! Move it! But watch that fucking turret!
Throw in sticky grenade!
And I think he's describing the ocean. Ooh, the ocean. Oh no, the mic's back. Right, okay. You just hear me be weird and say, ooh, the ocean. AJ, what's happening? What's the story?
Reloading.
We were talking about what the actual process is when people buy viewers and stuff, and just how weird it is.
Sticky grenade out!
You know what? Can I seem to be gaining RPGs. RPG. I think the game feels sorry for me. It's giving me more ammo. Jay Botson will know. Right, okay. I think some people are just delusional enough that at the end of their stream they see the stats and just go, wow, I did that. Yeah, but I don't. I think if you had just one person on chatting, I think that would be more meaningful. I suppose I'm weird like that. I have all you awesome people. And watching me fail horribly at this game. Right, I'm gonna wait. Right, don't pop your head up until you fucking heal. I'm right behind you. They're on me too. It's not all my fault. Watch out for the goal! Mike, what happened? What is the story? Grenade! I actually don't know how long we have on this. We seem to be making decent enough progress. I know I'm dying a lot, like, but you know, we're getting there. Mike, what is the crack? I had a stream recently. Chat was popping. At least to me. It's like a good stream, and then stats came through, and technically the worst stream I've had all year. I was happier that way, because then if the number was higher, yeah, the stats are nice, but at the end of the day, it's the interaction, it's the banter, the crack. Yeah, no, I thought I don't have a mic tab open. What the hell? Did Mike go live? Fuck. George's Jungle, watch out for that goal. This is true. Oh, one of my favorite jokes of all time, and any film is in George of the Jungle as well. It's at the very, very start with all. And they arrived at 8 Mountain and looked in awe. Oh, no awe. AWE is in wonder. Ooh, that's better. That's just so fucking stupid, but I love it. Stupid like Walker, who, read his name, fucking walks everywhere and doesn't see any urgency in his movement whatsoever. Love that scene. It was incredible and very underrated. Oh, definitely. Right. This is annoying.
Gotta take out that nest! Sticky out!
I have been micking for that cover in the left, and people keep murdering.
That's one.
Move up. But watch that fucking turret.
Watch out for the tree. Oh, yeah. RPG. Final Fantasy 8, their faces. I'm gonna keep one more, just in case some wee bastard decides to run in there. You. Go on. Sir. I'm trying to kill your friends. They don't appreciate it?
Got the son of a bitch.
Lad, pop your head up. No. Oh, you were acting all brave before, and now you're hiding? Now you're hiding? Is that how it is? Bad. Oh. You're really annoying me. See, this is the mindset to have. You have to enjoy yourself, focus on the stats, especially from folks who do stupid shit that remember and rob themselves. I'll give you a fucking hiding. I'll give you a hiding. Cleo is swinging that door open, flat out. She's just wandering about the house.
That's another one!
I am also getting chewed up.
God damn it!
Cleo, don't do it. Don't look at me. I can feel your judging eyes. I can feel you judging me. I've attempted to view some of the big channels. I know it sounds cool, but fuck me, they're not actually seem to enjoy themselves at all. It probably depends. I quite enjoy Musty's stream because Cat is absolutely flying, and the amount of energy she has to go through just to actually keep up with is mental. But fair play, acknowledges everybody, and everybody gets a nickname.
He's dead!
Absolutely brilliant. Don't know how she does it.
This is slowing me down.
I'm not Musty, I mean like 100. Hey, give Musty a week and that'll be her. We do not judge Musty. Musty is Bay. Musty's the boss. She's our cult leader.
Fuck! Another turret!
We need to cross over to the right. Run for it.
I feel like I'm at school and doing the cross code. So we need to cross over to the right, and now to the left we go over here. We go to this section. It's just strange when I'm at work. Very selfish if you ask me. I know. Chip. What is wrecking me? Don't want to do anything to his ass. I would like to leave his ass where it is. As much as possible.
Got the son of a bitch.
I'm just spraying and praying at this point. Bum. Did I get one in there? I probably could, you know. Yes I can. We got him. What's this? Stuck to one game forever. Misery the me. Oh, is this people who just specialize in the one game, or it's just like Call of Duty or something? Or Fortnite? Yeah, maybe, but if you really enjoy it as well, because you have like Subvertin who is really big on Zelda, and he's done really well with it. So, Hank, what is happening? Not that pick, but that's not how you throw a grenade. You know what? We've had to learn these strategies. Since Bruno Mars has claimed that he'll catch any grenade that we throw, we've had to change the way that we throw them, and now we throw them differently. So it's not our fault, it's Bruno Mars. See, when you throw a grenade tank as well, there's a wee line that appear to show you where it goes. I thought that's it. Video games have taught me that that's how it works. If it's not, then you're telling me video games have lied to me? Next you're going to tell me that standing in the one area while not getting shot makes you heal. Look, is there a chance you could snooze that ad for me, please? Please and thank you. Please and thank you.
That's what.
You know what? I appreciate these guys. They all came out and stood in the big line for me, and it made my job easier, and you know what? Fair play, fair play. Fair play, gentlemen. One man's next to you in a wee line down your leg, that's true. And if someone throws a grenade at you, you can actually just pick it up and throw it back. You have plenty of time. There's a wee timer appears actually and does it. That's oh, no, we're in ads. Ah, shit. Apologies, folks. We're in ads. No. I don't have it long enough to look at the line, sir. Being cover, pull a pin. That's a baseball throw, you know, because it's designed the same as one. Yeah, yeah, non-American. I'm non-American's not like in baseball. I know the Germans using them stick ones. Those guys must have done some fighting in the Congo. But like a Copacabana? Oh, shot. Got him. I don't want to cover your ass.
Got him!
Grenade. I do like that wee detail that if the grenade lands in sand, there's a big puff of sand that shoots up, but if it's just on concrete, it just explodes.
Here I go.
You're lucky I'm in ads, or there you up, sir. Apologies, Tank. Apologies.
Pay attention to that shotgun.
He's dead.
Oop. That's what I learned from Tomb Raider, the fact that it goes.
That's all of them.
Tank in his ads. It's Americans for you. He just loves ads. Tank actually pays for Turbo. He doesn't get ads and Twitch, but he pays extra for them because he just loves them so much. Love ads.
Shit.
Oh.
Fucking heavy. Take cover, goddammit.
Hugo!
You out of your fucking mind?
You left me to die.
What?
Shit. Open fire.
Don't you get it? It's all a lie.
No!
The kick is a lie.
You no fucking hero. I tried to save you.
I killed myself. I was like, no. Capitalism makes me horny. Oh no, this is part of it. Okay. Oh no, maybe it wasn't. What's happening? Right, your man appeared then. I get my grenade launcher ready and just pump him. Pump him with my grenades. Where are you? Where are you? Where are you?
Another fucking enemy. Take cover, goddammit.
Okay, now it's not your man. Wait, did I die, or is this what's supposed to happen?
Got the motherfucker! Heavy is fucking down!
We should kiss more inside.
I don't like the fact he called me heavy.
Keep him off me for a sec!
Rambunctiously round. Oh, it's like an automatic shotgun.
God damn it! Kill them all!
Pop your head out. Let's go. Oh, he doesn't have a head anymore. Lost the head on it. You fired 3 grenades at that close range. You should be dead with the first. No, Tank. I'm just that good. I'm just that good. Shrapnel. I'm not allergic to shrapnel. I have a high shrapnel tolerance. Been like that since the day I was born. Get off my lawn.
Making some heavy fire here.
Very matrixy, the way the colors are kind of discombobulating.
Son of a bitch! Reloading! Keep him off me!
There's nobody there. What are you talking about? Lost his mind. The American flag on the wall is also backwards. Is it? It's rotated. rotational.
No time like the present.
Well, that's how you know it's coming up to Christmas. Yep, up the stairs on the left. Where am I looking? Oh, stars go on the left, right. Okay, I see what you mean. Maybe it's inside out. I don't know.
You better watch that. I'm tired of these fucking heavy.
The grenade launcher? No. I shot that son of a bitch. I shot him. And he didn't die. He didn't die. Shenanigans! Blatant shenanigization. Oh, you mother cupboards. You know what? He's just a normal heavy now. I should be able to just kill him.
Gotta reload! Watch my back!
There's more inside.
Not for long.
We should keep moving.
I catch a grenade
Kill is
for
fucking
you.
confirmed.
Drink lemonade for you.
Kill them all!
I spy with my little eye. You! Grenade. No, 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 no. I want, no. One stop, pick up the wrong gun. Sir, 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 sir. Good.
Pay attention and watch your ass. Heavy moving in.
Now, just like in real life, I have to wait until my screen goes back to color, and then I'll be at full health. Because that's what they do in the hospital. They don't do blood tests. They don't check to see if you have a pulse. They ask you, do you see things in a beige or grey color, or do you see full color? And if it's full color, you're full health. And if it's not full color, they give you a medipack. Or in some cases, a chicken that they found in a bin. What do you reckon would be what's the weirdest form of HP in a game? You know, getting back health. I think Max Payne is up there with the painkillers. That's why the medical's called Grey's Anatomy. Yes. Rambo, John Rambo, welcome on. I am doing brilliant. The morphine in the army is S tier. Is it better than just normal morphine? Is it super different morphine? Is it mighty morphine Power Rangers? I'm good. Nice one. Great to hear it, man. I am very anxious about the potential bad weather that we're going to be getting. I don't like driving in the snow. It's no joke. Right, just let me kill him. There we go. There we go. We're sucking diesel now. He's just jabroni. Oh yeah, yeah. Mario's an odd one. Doubling your size. But mushrooms, I'm assuming mushrooms do that, dude. My guy's just standing there. Maybe grab some cover, bro. Yeah, he's ridiculous. Oh, it is. Sometimes they line up as well, which is mad. Where am I in civilian world? We'll be in a mission 4 or 5 days straight, and only minor sleep. Doc would give you a bump, and we'd all be out. I suppose that's a good way of doing it. You know, you can't sleep, but you need the rest.
This is your last chance, Walker. Surrender, or my men will cut you down.
Don't you dare! Well, fuck you then! I didn't come this far to surrender!
It's the only way inside that tower.
The fuck's sake! Give it up! The mission's over! We failed!
Not while I'm still breathing!
Fine! Then keep breathing!
Here's one area, shiny mask up, taking hits for Crash's mask, and Spyro's Dragonfly for... Yeah, and Sonic and his rings. I don't have any weapons. No. Explosions. Run, 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 run. Run, goddammit. I like it.
I'm sorry, Walker.
Or if you played The Getaway, that was a great game, but you healed by leaning up against the wall. And your wounds just eventually disappeared.
Friends dead. The world on fire. And you alone.
Alone. Go now. I never really did until I met you. I actually sang that in my head. I don't do it in chat anymore now because I know it's really annoying, but every time Mike's playing Final Fantasy 8 and doing a speedrun, and he has to go find Alone in the game, I go, how can I get you alone? The getaway heal mechanic was great, except when I played it and was reading everything, I had no idea. I was just struggling to do even one mission. You do that quite a bit where you skip stuff and Sierra's like, no, this is what you do. And you're like, oh, I didn't read that. I just skipped. Not true. You did it the other night. Alone in the park.
You used to be somebody I could trust. I woke up. Why don't you?
He does it all the time. See, Sierra's here to just back me up. I was playing and streaming. When playing and streaming, I do, yes. But, Lamosh, just to make this very, very clear, I don't see you play games when you're not streaming. Except for that one time I snuck into your house. But apart from that, I don't see you play games when you're not streaming. So the only evidence I have of this is when you are streaming. What I skipped the other night. I can't even remember what it was. But you're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And Sarah was like, oh, it's this. And you're like, oh, I didn't read the thing. I just skipped it. It was in Resident Evil. Then what were you doing in my room the other night? I was inside the cupboard smelling your pants. Don't see if they want to skip it. Silent Hill 2 though. What the fuck's this? What's going on here?
Captain Walker, we're all that's left at the damn 33rd.
They've killed everybody else.
We surrender, sir. Dubai is yours.
Where is
What?
Conrad?
Where he's always
Underpan.
upstairs, waiting for
There's 3 Resident Evil games that I am enjoying. Cheap decks for sale. This is nothing. Mine's like a steel trap. You'll better start checking them corners. Shanta by watching you shower.
Well done,
Ho,
Walker.
ho, ho.
You've done what the storm could not. Destroyed the damn 33rd. Do you feel like a hero yet?
Yes. I'm Nolan North.
Please, come in.
Is there going to be a big twist where it turns out I'm actually Nathan Drake? And all these years I've been murdering people, innocent people,
Now that you're here,
looking for
I want to
treasure
ask you a question.
or intelligence.
What did you think when you arrived?
I'm getting new house slippers for Christmas. I know, I'm fancy. Are they the ones with the nice kind of soft inner lining? Because I have a pair of those and they're phenomenal.
I thought you'd lost your
Here
goddamn
he watches the dog and at 0.5.
I hope that's what happened.
Don't judge my fetish. My slippers are underrated. Oh. I'll let you. Love it. As an old man, though, I appreciate a good pair of dog slippers? Of slippers. Not you. Not going to turn you into slippers. You're a good girl. Aren't you? But Sierra never gave you a treat because she doesn't love you. I want to look about your house. Man, you size of this. Sure.
Done rifling through my things. Please join me.
No, I know it's annoying. You know, this is Flimmush's house. You know, I once applied for a job to install mirrors. It's something I could really see myself doing. I have both summer and winter house slippers. You're a man of class. I found a missing house slipper yesterday and never felt more comfy. My favorite running joke is because her face when you do it was amazing. But I've been trying to give her a treat, but it's on timeout. Hook gave her a treat earlier because Hook actually loves her.
The reality of what happened here.
And the flex, I don't know what it is. I know summer and winter slippers. I just have the winter ones because over here it's just winter. That's all we have. sure Aussies have some weird name. Flip-flop songs. We call them flip-flops. The slide-on flippy floppy ones. But everything else is slippers. But also, some people call trainers slippers, so that's a different thing.
Your eyes are opening for the first time.
I see.
It hurts, doesn't it?
Slippy dips. That's a different thing. That's a different thing. That's how babies are made.
Go on. What do you think?
Flippy floppies. It's like the inventor was a Frenchman called Philippe Flop.
You did this. No, you did. Your orders killed 47 innocent people.
Yeah, that was me.
Someone has to pay for your crimes, Walker. Who's it going to be?
Muncher. Very good. I have to try one of them. They look like a delicious sandwich. Is this guy even real?
John?
Who the fuck is he?
Is that you? You tell me.
I'm done playing games, John.
I assure you, this is no game.
He's so dramatic, isn't he? Oh no, he's dead. Oh fuck. Conrad's dead. We done fucked up. He's in your head. In your head.
It seems that reports of my survival have been greatly exaggerated.
Oh, see what he
This is
does there.
impossible.
Oh, I assure you.
It's impossible.
How? Not how. Why? You were never meant to come here.
We have our orders. Leave the city, radio command from outside the storm wall. They send in the cavalry, we go home. What happened here was out of my control.
Was it? None of
You're
this would have
fine.
happened if you just stopped.
No.
But on you marched. And for what?
We
So it's
tried
normal.
to save you.
You're
I
no
would say it's probably
savior.
quite common.
Your talents lie elsewhere.
This is your fault, goddammit!
Stop right there, Lugo.
He wouldn't listen!
We didn't have a choice!
He turned us into fucking killers!
This isn't my fault.
It takes a strong man to deny what's right in front of him.
Oh, I'm
and
speaking
if the
now.
truth is undeniable,
Oh shit.
you create your own.
What the hell happened?
I don't know, he just stopped moving.
Walker, snap out of it.
I get it. We have to choose.
The truth, Walker, is that you're here because you wanted to
Oh,
feel
they were
like
both
something
dead as
you're
well.
not.
Right, okay.
Hero.
Lugo! You left me to die!
I'm here because you can't accept what you've done. It broke you.
Colonel? Colonel, please.
What's going on, Walker?
It's Conrad. He did it. All of it.
You needed someone to blame.
Holy shit.
You cast it on me. You're a dead man.
You the bad guys?
I know the truth is hard to hear, Walker, but it's time. You're all that's left, and we can't live this
Are we the
life
baddies? Exactly.
forever.
Which is a phenomenal skit.
I'm going to count to 5. Then I'm
Phenomenal.
pulling the
Like
trigger.
this game's been brilliant. Absolutely
They're
brilliant.
not real. This is all in my head.
Are you sure? Maybe it's in mine.
Like it starts off as just a generic war game.
No. Everything. All this. It was your fault.
If that's what you believe, then shoot me. 2.
I didn't mean to hurt anybody.
No one ever does, Walker. 3.
Who did I shoot?
It takes a strong man to deny what's in front of him.
Stronger than you were.
It's like Shutter Island.
Whatever you say, Walker. No matter what happens next, don't be too hard on yourself. Even now, after all you've done, you can still go home.
Oh.
Lucky you.
What now, sir?
Huh?
The men are asking. What do we do now?
I'm Conrad.
We complete our mission.
And what mission would that be, sir?
Just get me a gun.
Oh no, he's not even real.
Radio.
Shit. Big creamy. Oh, I love your man. Kingdom Hearts form. War
This
Cry.
is Captain Martin Walker. Requesting immediate
Goofy and Donald
evacuation
weren't
of
even
Dubai.
there the entire time.
Survivors.
Thor was just in the Final Fantasy world and had just gone mad. He was a Genova clone. Too late, the hero. Fuck, it's over. That was epic. Phenomenal. Wouldn't I lose Orgy? Oh, there's a good hero. That's my good hero. Best puppy in the whole wide world. I know all the other puppies are good as you. They're second. Detroit Become Human, loads of surprises in that. I haven't watched them. I watched Sierra play that recently. I'll die in that hell. You know what, Ian, you know what? Next Wednesday I'll be Song of Horror. Just for you. Just because you did suggest it. We'll do that, alright? Okay. Look at you playing a 360 game to honor the upcoming anniversary. That's exactly why. It timed it perfectly, doesn't it? Timed it perfectly. Aye, and she got 1 out of 200 odd endings and so. Oh Jesus, that's a lot. Best for year confirmed. So, darling, I love you. I love you the best. What's your bother? What's happening, darling? What's happening? Hey, hey. Let's see. So, could you actually look and see what achievements I have left? Is there anything? Oh, shit's still happening. Shit's still happening. Game ain't over. Game ain't over. We got a cutscene. Leo, we got a cutscene. We got a cutscene. Dora needs walkies. Great streaming. Lamosh, thank you very much for coming on. You know, perhaps she's just fed up listening to you. That's why I pay him to be the best viewer. Hope Thorne enjoys his walkies. Thank you very much for coming on to the mush as well, especially after your long trip too. We still going. We still going. Shit is still happening. I also have to go, but thank you so much for the great. Sarah, thank you very much as well for coming on. I appreciate you. Am I getting away? Am I getting away scot-free here?
It's okay. Hold your fire.
Oh, I got a beard. I got hair and a beard.
What's he
Didn't
doing?
have them before. Is a streamer?
Look at his eyes.
This can only bode well.
Something's not right.
True.
Captain Walker, we are here to help. But first, I need you to lay down your weapon.
He's not complying.
I'm trying. I don't have a drop weapon. There we go. I was about to say I don't have a drop weapon button.
It's over.
I also have a Desert Eagle. Why am I wearing the Conrad shirt?
Time to go home.
Shadows Fire. Look at these legends in one place. I know. I'm blessed. I paid for all the best viewers. And then he went to work at Primark. And no one ever knew. No one knew about the atrocities. Or is it going to be ambiguous like American Psycho? Was it in his head the whole time? Or was it...
Captain, we drove through this whole city to find you. We saw things.
These aren't cheap viewers. They're not.
asking.
They're not. They're premium viewers.
How'd you survive all this?
Who said I did?
Ooh. War. Never change it. This is... That? Oh, that's it over now. Ooh, there's multiplayer as well. Actually, see, every time I've uploaded one of my YouTube videos, there's a fella comes on and keeps putting me comment on going, oh, I'll play multiplayer. We must be just having his own going. Man, I really want someone to play this game. This game's awesome. I wonder if you guys can see this. Yeah, you can. So let's see. More options. Game card. Let's bring up my achievements. I might have to go up to my actual achievements. Settings. Nope, not there. The game and apps. Game and apps. Game and apps. Oh, it's a bit that says all achievements. That's what does it. That's what does it. Oh, there's Tank right there. Look, there he is there at the top of the screen. Lad himself. I've only got 475 out of the achievements. Progress. Right, okay. 30 out of 50. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. He's one of the devs. He's so happy someone is playing the game. It could be as well. You would do that though. If you made your own game and you're really happy about it, you'd be like, oh man, I'm going to check people out playing it. My God, is this Lord of the Rings? How many endings does it have? I know. Completed the game on combat up difficulty. Completed the game on walk on the beach difficulty, so that must be easy and normal. Here on soldier. End of the line. Choose restraint. Only 16% of gamers chose restraint. My God. That's all to do with all the kills. Kill an enemy tag with a sticky grenade. Yeah, did that. Stand united. Kill 150 enemies with any heavy weapon. See, a lot of them are good high percentage. People are making their way through this game. Of the people who played it. Playing it smart. Oh, I think that's the end of the ones that I've got. Save a bullet. Fuck the chain. Oh, that must be if you don't fire at the end. Here, it's like 8 quid. Yeah, that's what I paid for it. I bought it on eBay for like 8 quid. Great game. Great game. So worth it. Off the top of my head, I think it's right, but I need to log into my wallet. I couldn't be arsed for that. There's a very specific number. Oh, like 735 of those. Oh, Dogecoin? Dogecoins? Bitcoins. Right, we'll cover all that. Only 4% of people have done this. Tank, have you done this? Have you got all into? Kill the orcs? Killing orcs? What the fuck's an orcs? There we go. That is sweet. Nice one. Another game completed. ChatGPT did say to me, it's all like... Transition! I was like, how long is it going to take me to finish it? It's all, depends on skill level, but maybe 1, maybe 2 streams. And I was like, right, okay, I'll buffer it. I'll think 2 streams. We did it in 1. By we, I mean me. So there he is himself. I know, it's big me. As opposed to wee me. Oh, the game wants to kill the Taken King. I know. Unfortunately. Off the top of my head, I think it's right, but I need to log in. Oh, all right, okay. Yeah, okay. That was actually really cool. I really enjoyed myself. I had all of the fun tonight. So what we're going to do is we're going to find some cool motherfucker to raid. Thank you, everybody, coming on. Thank you for the resubs. Thank you for the Gigantifies. Thank you for the bats. These are all absolutely cool. And I had an absolute ball tonight. So I am going to see which one of our cool friends we can raid on there. So let me have a look. Thanks for the stream. Oh, thank you, everybody who came on as well. These are all class. I mean, that's the whole point of it. Like, isn't it just the chat, right? And just have the banter. Bum, 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 bum. Does anybody have any recommendations as well? Any cool people on? I know we're not going to get anybody playing Spec Ops, but anybody else? Bants. Bantman. Thanks for the stream, streamer. Let's see. Okay, you're the only one streaming this. Yes, number one stream. Number one. You know what? I can't really find anybody, so I'm going to. I think I might just raid on the Memory Care. Really, really sound fella. Plays a lot of stuff on OG hardware. Really, really cool fella. And he's playing through Shadow Hearts Covenant at the moment. So I'm assuming that's like the one that Pops was playing not that long ago. So if any's can hang about, we're going to pop on a wee raid message, which goes, "Ba-doo!" And I'm going to start the raid up to go in and have a wee chat with Memory Carp. Carp is dead on. Lovely, lovely fella. Lovely fella. But I am going to be back tomorrow night with more Final Fantasy 16. And then we're going to be playing Song of Horror next Wednesday, as per Ian's request. Thank you so much, folks. I had an absolute brilliant time. And I will catch you all tomorrow. And I'll see you then. Bye.
Dreams collide, a fairy tale unfolds with every pixel, every turn, a story yet untold. Leyoric, the dreamer with a heart so bright, but when the shadows fall, he's lost in the night. Oh, Leyoric, don't you lose your way in this final fantasy where heroes play. The echoes of your courage will never die, so hold on tight, let the journey begin. In the echoes of dreams, that's where you'll win. Hold the journey.